brought to you in association with Aluminium International Today and the Aluminium World Fair. My name is Nadine Bloxham and I'm the editor of Aluminium International Today magazine and also the content director for the Future Aluminium Forum. Now, in light of this year's Aluminium Show being postponed to the 18th to the 20th of May 2021, Aluminium International Today and the show organisers have teamed up to offer this week-long series of online interactive presentations. More urgently than ever, the aluminium industry needs impulses and ideas to find its way out of the current situation, and this collaboration provides a unique opportunity to offer industry news and updates to the sector at a time where we should all have been together in Düsseldorf and doing business face-to-face. So we know this won't be quite the same as being able to network in person and also sharing a drink or two at the extravagant reception parties that are usually held at the show. But we hope that you'll be able to join us this week to hear from industry experts on some of the most important topics and challenges that we currently face. Now, we have a great lineup of speakers waiting in the wings for you today, and the purpose of this first webinar is to provide an overview into how the aluminium value chain is coping in the wake of COVID-19 and ascertain where the recovery is most needed. For the format today, we'll see each of the speakers present, and there will be some time after each presenter is finished to ask a couple of questions. We will also hold a Q&A at the end once all speakers have presented. If you'd like to ask a question to any of the speakers, please just enter this into the designated Q&A box that you can see on your screen. And if you could just put the name of the speaker you would like to address your question to, that way I'll know who to ask. Also, if you have any general comments as we go along or would like to raise a point for discussion, then please use the main chat box to interact with other participants and to do this. Also, don't worry if you miss anything. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for download afterwards. So you will be sent a link as soon as the recording is available, but you can also view this webinar and any previous sessions we have run by visiting www.aluminiumtoday.com/on-demand webinars. So I will add this link into the chat box in a second for you. Now, as mentioned, we should have all been in Düsseldorf this week at the Aluminium World Trade Fair, and this fair and the organisers are working to set the course for the restart of the industry. So we'd like to begin today's webinar with a video from the organisers, and then before I will hand over to Gert of Jungmichael, who is the event director at Reed Exhibitions, to hear about the importance of live events.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Aluminum Online Showcase Series, a joint event which will be hosted by Aluminium International Today and the Aluminum World Trade Fair. I am pleased that we can realize this online event together in this special year under these challenging circumstances for all of us, for the entire aluminum industry. We know how important it is for the aluminum industry to receive exclusive industry information, which under normal circumstances we would have discussed at the show in a few days in the aluminum fair in Düsseldorf. But unfortunately we had to postpone Aluminum 2020. After the end of the lockdown, the Aluminum World Trade Fair should have provided impulses for a market revival of the aluminum industry this October. But the negative effects of the corona pandemic still have the world firmly under control. It was already clear this summer that the aluminum industry still needs some time to find its way out of the crisis. The exhibitors therefore had asked for a postponement of the trade fair this year. We as organizers, of course, supported this decision of the industry. Together with the exhibitors and our partners, we firmly believe that May 2021 is the right time for a new beginning for the aluminum trade fair and the industry. We have set the course for the future together now. Why do we firmly believe in an exhibition in May 2021? The aluminum industry urgently needs sales markets for its products. The good news is that the future for the lightweight construction material aluminum remains good in the long term. The changes in the mobility and transport sector, or the developments in the construction sector, have slowed down due to the corona crisis, but it will not stop developments in the long term. Innovations and creativity, digitalization and sustainability are the requirements for a successful aluminum industry in the future. With Aluminum 2021, we will support you in these challenges. How can we do that? The Aluminum 2021 can be the initial spark to revive the business. But even more important, the trade fair can accompany the industry on its important path of transformation. How will we do it? We will make our world-leading platform itself fit for the future, with the right themes, topics, and of course, new and exciting and entertaining formats. Can trade fairs ever be held safely again? That is a clear yes. In close cooperation with local health authorities, we have developed a hygiene concept that protects all participants. In Düsseldorf, where the Aluminum Trade Fair is held, the Caravan Salon, the world's largest trade fair for camping and caravanning, was already launched in September with more than 100,000 visitors, and nothing went wrong. And it has proven trade fairs can be successful and safe for exhibitors and visitors alike. We learned from this and other shows taking place in the meantime in order to present a safe Aluminum 2021. What do we do for people who may not be able to come to Düsseldorf next May due to travel restrictions or other incidents? In addition to the classic live event, we are also working on linking exhibitors and visitors virtually. Our hybrid trade fair concept combines live events and new modern digital formats, for example, with our video matchmaking platform. We will look for potential cooperation partners, investors, manufacturers, or distributors and bring them together virtually within our digital video matchmaking platform. Digital product highlights and live streams expand the trade fair offers and make it possible to get involved even if you cannot be there physically. Digital solutions help, but Corona has also shown us that there are limits. Digital cannot replace. It cannot replace the interpersonal contact and exchange, the explanations of products which require special descriptions. It cannot replace the haptic experience of products at a trade fair, and it cannot replace personal contacts at a trade fair, which remain indispensable for long-term, trusting business relationships. And the momentum of coincidence. People getting together, meeting, discussing over ideas, and bringing up new ideas they have never thought about. Therefore, we count on you. The future does not wait. So join us in designing the upcoming Aluminum Trade Fair. See you in Düsseldorf in May 2021. And last but not least, I wish you all a successful and informative event in the next upcoming days.
Yes, thank you very much, Nadine, and good morning to everyone. It is a great pleasure to be here in this project, all digital, and in order to pay reference to our show that we would actually have hosted this week. But as we all know, we're here now, and I'm very grateful that this project came to life, and feel very honored to be here with all of you and to look into details. I had to say the internet connection on my side was not so good, but I remember what I was saying. So in case there are any questions before we start into the facts and figures about aluminum and the industry, ask me, because we are convinced that shows can take place, that the marketplaces are safe, And we had a very good example in Düsseldorf with the Caravan Salon, proven that, first of all, they have at Messe Düsseldorf a great concept for security and safety. And with us and the experience we have gathered so far, we should be very well off. And by then, until May, it's still another half year to go. So all the signs are up. And we are very optimistic in welcoming the aluminum industry then into Düsseldorf. So back to you, Nadine.
Thank you. That's really good to hear as well that there's the optimism there, and I think, well, I hope I speak for a few people across the industry when I know that we're missing this whole live event situation. We're missing being able to interact face to face. And just a couple of questions then to you, Gert. What is, in your opinion, obviously, what are the real benefits when it comes to live events, and what can we then expect when hopefully we can get back off the ground again next year?
Well, coming together physically is always needed when starting business, when doing sales, when originating new business. Of course, you can put out websites, you can put out postings, you can send mails, but it's this the trust you need to find in your counterpart in order to know if you're on the right track, if you want to do business, if you're speaking about the same issues, if you have the same values. That is something you can only get to know once you meet each other and you have this face-to-face conversation and could see if the chemistry is good. And then you would start doing business. So that's why we think it's very important to meet and get together. Of course, then afterwards, can you still hear me? Digital means can help and save time in the end, but it's to get started. It's still the best way to meet up front first and then.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Nadine. I'll assume everything's working unless I get somebody shouting at me saying it's not. For today, I'm going to try and answer a question that we get a lot from our subscribers, and it's really to make sense of it. We're all very involved in particular markets, but today can be quite hard to get a sense of what's happening globally. So I'm going to aim to give you an overview of what's been happening over the past few months and what to think about for 2021. So first on CRU, we're a business which focuses on metals, mining and fertilizers, analysis and consultancy. Within aluminium, we have over 20 analysts spread across 3 continents. I have a silhouette there because we're hiring in Asia still, so we're expanding our team in Asia, we're expanding our team in North America, and we have a really big footprint in Europe. So our focus is to be in the markets where people are really interested, where we can add the value, and we have full coverage from bauxite, alumina, aluminium, down to rolled products, extrusions, foil. We're doing a lot of work on recycling today as well. It's a huge focus for our customer base. Here's a legal notice which you can read at your convenience. And the data that I'm going to talk about today and the information is from CRU's Aluminium Market Outlook service. And here's some information on that service, and also from the CRU Aluminium Monitor service. So this is our most frequent service that we provide to clients, and we have daily updates, weekly physical market premiums, deep dives on demand and supply. So as I go through, you will see the sources at the bottom, and please get in touch with me if you want more information on the CRU aluminium services. I'd be really happy to discuss them with you. So I believe you will have seen in the first slide I said welcome to the long slog, which isn't going to get anybody particularly excited, but this background, what's happening with the global economy, is really important when we think about prices, when we think about consumption. We've had 2 phases of this crisis nearly pass. We've had the really deep recessions, the most severe lockdowns. We may have lockdowns again, but we won't have the severity that we had in China in the first quarter, across the rest of the world in later months. What we have enjoyed, and I don't want to use that phrase particularly much, but we have seen a strong rebound over the past few months. We've bounced back from that really severe weakness that we saw in the first quarter and into the first half of the second quarter. Now, that can happen because there's a lot of pent-up demand, economies are working again, but now we're moving into what we think of as the long slog. The economy is getting back to normal with social distancing, living with COVID, living with the uncertainty that consumers around the world face, higher unemployment, and this will persist really through until 2022, and then we will get a sense for how much of the output has been lost, so how much smaller is the global economy than it would have been otherwise. So this is really important when we think about what's happening with prices, what's happening with consumption. And this slide gives you a sense of how severe the weakness in aluminium consumption was earlier in the year. So when this data point that I flag here, minus 34% in May, that's world excluding China aluminium consumption year on year on a year-on-year change basis. So that's the most severe decline we've ever seen on a monthly basis. The financial crisis, we didn't see contractions in demand of that scale. Now, that quick rebound means that we didn't stay at contractions of that scale for very long. And now we're moving to a point where we're between 5 to 10% down on previous year levels. But we have a huge amount of uncertainty as we move into the final quarter and as we move into 2021. The companies we talk to, and we spend a lot of time surveying rolling companies, extrusions companies, foil, primary aluminium producers and traders, there's no real visibility. Once you go a few months ahead, people don't have great confidence in the strength of consumption. Now, this slide is saying what's been happening with primary aluminium production. The last slide was a crisis slide. This slide looks pretty normal. We see continued growth in primary aluminium production in China. This year, 3.5% growth. Next year, up to over 6%. Outside of China, we're effectively flat in 2020, very small growth in 2021. There has been some closures. In China, there were some earlier in the year, but now there's a lot of new low-cost capacity ramping up in Yunnan in particular, but also in Mongolia. Aluminium smelters outside of China have not been under intense pressure. We have seen some closures. Ferndale in the US, San Ciprian in Spain is really, very close to closure at this point, and Rio Tinto signaled it would close Tuai Point in New Zealand. That looks less certain now that it will definitely close. So we've seen some closures, but there's also ramp-ups in Canada, a restart of Bécancour, Alba, Line 6, delivering growth on a year-on-year basis, and we look to Taichet in Russia and Malaysia in 2021. So there's still production growth, and the reason there's production growth is aluminium smelters have been making money. This has not been a crisis which has seen profitability really fall. So that's the real reason why we haven't seen a decline in aluminium production while demand has been so weak. And this is the opposite. So this is really showing the crisis in consumption. And the really important point I want to bring out from this slide is this is Chinese aluminium consumption growth, and this is what's happening in the rest of the world on the right-hand side. So China this year will eke out a small increase in primary aluminium consumption. Incredible, given what has happened in China this year. So it really shows the strength of domestic stimulus, the rebound we've seen in the Chinese economy, and the return to normality. Next year is looking like a very good year for the construction market in China. Automotive market is already bouncing back, so we will see good growth in China in 2021. In the rest of the world, it's been particularly bad. We're looking at a contraction of 13% this year, and we're not making that up next year. So we will fall by close to 4 million tons in consumption this year. We're only regaining about 2.7. So consumption is staying below the 2019 levels outside of China. And what does that mean? So we've talked about it on production. Really important point on production. Smelters have not been losing money. There's been good profitability across the industry, particularly in China. On the consumption side, we've seen very severe declines in primary aluminium consumption, rolled products, extrusions, recycled aluminium. And what that has meant is we've been producing a lot more metal than has been consumed. So this year, we will have nearly 4 million ton surplus on a global basis. The vast majority of that is outside of China, with a million ton surplus in China. So this is the chart at the top that I'm speaking to now. When we look at this number outside of China, it's really important. You have a 2.6 million ton surplus. The vast majority of that happened between April to June. So when demand was really weak, that's when we saw warehouses filling up at the most rapid pace. There is still some surplus today, but it's nowhere like what we saw in Q2. Into next year, continued surplus outside of China. China is getting a little bit better because we expect that strength in the construction sector and year-on-year growth from transportation. Now, we could get into talking about anti-dumping, but I won't talk about it at this point. But really, when we're thinking about Chinese exports, it's becoming harder and harder for China to export more aluminium to the rest of the world. It's facing anti-dumping measures in more and more places, and really the key consuming regions have now said, we're not happy with the material which is coming in, we can prove dumping, and we're enforcing anti-dumping measures. So we're seeing that happening in more and more places. So we talked about collapsing demand, we talked about huge increases in inventories, massive uncertainty on the future for the global economy. Well, aluminium prices don't quite tell that story. Aluminium prices are telling a different story. They're talking about the recovery in the global economy. So when we look at the LME price, it hit its lows in April, really started to rally from May onwards, and we recovered to the pre-crisis levels by July, so late July, August time. This was really driven by incrementally the global economy was getting better. We had seen the dollar weaken very significantly from March onwards. So we had that real crisis of confidence, dollar strengthened. Really from that point onwards, we've seen a 10% decline in the dollar index. That's very supportive for commodity prices. And then when we think about China, for industrial commodities, just always remember, China is over 50% of consumption for nearly every industrial commodity. And China is by far and away the best performing big economy in the world. So if China is doing well, China is importing material, and China was importing primary aluminium this year, that's positive for prices. You put that with a backdrop of central banks, national governments, all doing everything they can to support a recovery, that gives confidence that things are going to get better and has delivered a rally in the price. And when we look at the Shanghai price, it was an even quicker rebound. And that was driven by the strength of the recovery in demand, confidence that the Chinese government gave, and also we saw the Shanghai market in backwardation. Physical markets were trading at a premium to Shanghai. These are all real signals that the Chinese market is tight. Inventories were falling, and that has led to the price rallying. Now, over the past month, we've seen stability in prices and starting to fall off, and we think this is the start of a kind of a catch-up with reality for metals prices. Because yes, central banks have done a lot. There has been a good recovery in demand, but we're well below where we were previously, and smelter profitability is very high. When we see smelters this profitable, typically we see prices coming off. And this is our view for 2021 LME prices. For the fourth quarter of this year, we think the price will average $1,725, and then we'll start a slow decline in prices, which is mirroring that long slog for the global economy. Yes, China is doing better. Yes, demand is improving, but we're not going to see the dollar weaken in the way we have over the past 5 months or so. And we're not going to see a continued building in the recovery. So the fact that the dollar weakness is effectively done for the coming 6 months at least, the global economy is losing momentum. That's prompting investors to say, we've sat into an aluminium rally now over the past number of months, it's time for us to take profit. And when we look at investor positioning, they're quite long the aluminium market. So the aluminium price is exposed to those investors selling their positions, taking profit after the rally. And we think that that's going to play out over the next year. One of the things that we will be paying a huge amount of attention to in 2021 is the ramp-ups of aluminium capacity in Yunnan. Between the end of 2019 and the end of 2021, nearly 3 million tons of aluminium smelting capacity will ramp up in Yunnan province in China. This is one of the big stories in terms of impacting the aluminium market balance, a big focus from investors in China, how successful these ramp-ups will be. So that will have a big bearing on prices if we do see some disruptions to those ramp-ups. So that's something very important to watch out for. Everybody who's thinking about sustainability, you should also be paying attention to what's happening in Yunnan, because this is China making a huge shift from coal-based aluminium smelting in Shandong to hydro-based aluminium smelting in Yunnan province. So that's also something which people will think about, and when we're thinking more and more about the likes of carbon borders, that movement in China is incredibly important. On ingot premiums. Ingot premiums have really had a phenomenal year, particularly in the USA. In the USA, we went from 18 cents per pound into the US Midwest in late 2019, down to 7 cents per pound in the second quarter at a low point. So it averaged 8.2, but we got down to 7 cents per pound on a weekly low in the second quarter. At that point, you had US producers saying there's too much material coming in from Canada. There's been a surge of imports, which breaches the agreement that we have with Canada to give exemption to the 10% Section 232 tariff. That was agreed, and we saw tariffs going back on Canada for imports. Nearly immediately, imports of unalloyed primary aluminium, nearly immediately you saw the US change approach and say Canada can ship nearly 80,000 tons a month into the US market. What we've seen is on that first move where Canada imports of P1020 from Canada faced the duty, the premium went from 7 cents per pound up to 15 cents per pound, which makes sense based on material having to come from elsewhere facing the duty. Now, as Canada has this slightly vague, complex structure around imports, we've seen the premium drift down, and in the forward market, it's trading at about 12 cents per pound. So the US is really where all the action is, and people are paying a lot of attention to the election in early November, because if it is a Biden win, the US aluminum trade agreements with Canada have become quite complex. There's a good expectation that they would be simplified. This has a big bearing on the European market. So Canada can only ship 80,000 tons of P1020 unalloyed ingot into the US market before it faces the 10% duty. What that has meant is there is nearly 80,000 tons a month coming from Canada into the European market. And it's coming to the European market because of the Canada-EU Free Trade Agreement. So Canadian producers can sell at the European duty paid price, which is more attractive than selling into the Asian market. So that's going to limit the ability for the Rotterdam duty paid premium to trade at a 3% differential to the Rotterdam duty unpaid premium. And we think that it won't be until well into 2021 that that full differential is priced in. In Asia, it's been pretty stable. We have seen premiums pick up in the past couple of months, and the biggest driver there in the terms of the increase has been China importing metal. So China has imported nearly 500,000 tons of metal in 2020. That's had an impact in terms of people are out there bidding for metal in Asia because they can turn a profit shipping it into the Chinese market. When we look to next year, the big uncertainty is for the US Midwest premium. You could be anywhere from 10 cents to 17 cents, depending on the way the election goes and the decisions that are made around the Canadian exemption to Section 232 tariffs. We do not think Section 232 tariffs are gone, that they will go if Biden wins. These are steel and aluminum tariffs. There's a lot of people involved, a lot of discussions that need to happen for those to be dropped. So we think Section 232 will remain, but the Canadian relationship is likely to change if you have a Biden presidency. So what are the key conclusions? Well, I think on demand, we have to say we have bounced back well. We were always going to bounce back from how severely bad it was in the second quarter. The major risk now is, where do we settle? Do we settle close to flat on where we were previously, or do we settle down 10% on where we were previously for this long slog period that will run into the first half of 2022? Smelters have been profitable. At the moment in China, every aluminium smelter is profitable. That situation never persists for particularly long. It comes to an end when either operating costs rise or the price falls. Today, we don't think operating costs are going to rise. We think the price will fall. That decline in the Shanghai price will feed through to the LME, and that will lead to this general downtrend in prices that we're looking to in 2021. And the prices have factored in a major recovery. Now, you could be more bearish here and say, well, maybe, why aren't we back at $1,400 if you've got so much metal piled up in warehouses around the world, so much uncertainty on demand and all these smelters making money? We need to think about the central banks. So in a macro environment, if we really are to see prices falling, that's going to be coming at a time when confidence is going. If confidence is going in global asset markets, central banks are going to act. So we're not expecting prices to collapse because you effectively have a central bank backstop that wants to keep markets functioning well. Premium volatility will be a key focus for next year. The US is really going to keep us on our toes, and it will have an impact on the Rotterdam duty paid premium because it's going to impact Canadian flows. Now, please get in touch with me if there's any questions you don't get a chance to ask today, or if you want to talk about the CRU services. And I'm going to make one plug, Nadine, and then pass it over to you. CRU's 25th Aluminium Conference was happening this year. We've moved over to a virtual conference series. We had our first installment in early September, which was the European installment. We will have our North American edition in early November. Really look forward to connecting with as many people as possible on our virtual conference. And it was a huge success last time around. Really animated debates around sustainability. So we're looking forward to more of those again. So thank you very much. I'll pass back to you, Nadine.
Thank you very much, Aaron, and no problem about the plug. You are always more than welcome, and we'll also put a link to the CRU, the event, the American event that's coming up. I'll make sure to pop a link in the chat box, or Aaron, you're more than welcome to as well, so that people can go directly there and see how to register. I completely agree. The first one of the European conference of the part of the series that took place the other week was fantastic, and it was really interesting to hear this huge focus on sustainability, which we will be looking at slightly in a couple of the presentations time, and also we have a dedicated green technologies webinar tomorrow if anybody also wants to join in on that one. Now, just a couple of questions then while we have still got Owen, and if you also have any questions for him, please pop them in the Q&A box. I think people are being quite quiet this morning, so we haven't had many coming in, but please, while he's here, take advantage of him being on the line. So Owen, just a couple of points that you mentioned. It was really interesting to hear because there was quite a few differentiating factors. You're mentioning obviously this strong rebound and how we've bounced back after the last few months, but also this massive uncertainty moving into 2021. Obviously the pandemic had a huge effect and we'll continue to see the repercussions of that, but how much of this kind of uncertainty do you believe is due to the last few months and us going into 2021? Do you think we would have still had some sort of uncertainty if we hadn't have had the last few months that we have had?
God, it's hard to even think about what the world would have been like if that hadn't panned out. I think we were late stage of an economic recovery, which was already looking pretty weak in 2019. So I think, all things being equal, and if we'd been back to a different world, we probably would have had I think 2020 was shaping up to be okay. Actually, the beginning of the year, we were getting lots of, kind of people saying it feels like the worst has passed in late 2019, and things were shaping up a little bit better into 2020. But it would never have been a really strong year. It would have been kind of a late cycle rebound maybe. So I think we would have been looking at a fairly flat year otherwise, and people would have had that kind of niggling doubt around kind of strength of the economy. But I think the biggest thing that has been happening and would have happened irrespective of if we had the pandemic or not is more anti-dumping cases against China. And the more of those cases that we see, they really make it very interesting for companies, because all of a sudden you've pulled 10% of supply out of a market. So you have a huge opportunity to look at. So I think what we would be looking at in 2021, particularly focused on the European market, would be just people incredibly excited about how do we recapture the market share, which was given to China on extrusions, and people would be looking ahead to the case on rolling and thinking, what changes could occur here. So I think for the European market, you would have had, not a robust economy, but for the aluminium sector, big opportunities around changes in trade flows. Of course, what's happening in the US makes it even more difficult. But yeah, I think there would have been more optimism because people would have seen opportunities to regain market share.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that. Was quite a hard question. It's hard to even imagine what a world would be like without this pandemic at the moment. But we'll hopefully we'll get there, and we'll cast our memories back to other times. One point that you had mentioned as well, which I thought was quite interesting, and again brings in this idea of the sustainability efforts. You said obviously about the increased amount of hydro-based smelting that's now taking place in China. I'm not sure if you do know the answer to this, but is this something that we'll be seeing more of from the Chinese, and something that they're planning to implement across either some of the smelters that are already in place, or for the new technology and new investments?
No, they do have real limitations here. So they're probably pushing Yunnan province to the limit at the moment. So it's a test to see if Yunnan hydro base can really support the amount of aluminium smelting that's going in down there. And we think that over the dry season, you're actually likely to see thermal power, so coal-based power plants, filling a gap for those smelters. And if you look outside of Yunnan, you've some hydro potential in Sichuan, but there's not a great amount. In China, it has scarcity of water resources, and when they think about, China is adding a lot of hydropower, but nothing of the scale that can support a big aluminium industry. So we think that we're not expecting another Yunnan to come. The probably more important point is the greening of the Chinese grid. So China is adding a lot of solar, a lot of wind, also nuclear, but the grid mix is gradually moving away from a dependence on coal. And when we look out 20 years, you see a big change in the Chinese grid. And from the comments that have come out in the past couple of weeks from Xi Jinping, also showing that China's quite serious about reducing carbon emissions. So, not as ambitious as Europeans, but we're coming from a very different place. So there isn't really another Yunnan, but I think what the next Yunnan is probably recycling. So what we see is the Chinese aluminium companies making big investments in recycling, like really, really big investments in recycling, quite staggering. So China Hongqiao has partnered. It's Weiqiao has partnered with the company that Schultz acquired in China to develop a full automotive shredding, sortation, and secondary aluminium production base. You've got companies like Nanshan investing in recycling capacity on rolled products. So I think China is looking at carbon footprint, but the easier win for China is, hey, where are we using our scrap today? And if we're using it all in ADC12, DIN 226 type secondary aluminium production, we should be using that. We should be using the can scrap to make beverage cans, and we should be using extrusion scrap to make billet. So I think there isn't another Yunnan, but there is a huge investment happening in recycling, and the Chinese companies are very aware that this is what the government wants them to do, and that there's a big increase in domestic scrap generation coming, and with that, big opportunities, I think.
Excellent, that's really interesting to hear, and I'm sure something that will come up again across some of our other green technology focused webinars that we've got coming up. I'll finish just with one question, because we've had a few more questions have come in now, which is great. I think you've stirred up some interest, and everybody's now had their morning coffee as well, which helps. But one of the questions we've had is just to ask about the European producers and how they face the consumption coming from the anti-dumping measures. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So this is going to be this is a real test, I think, for Europe. And when we look at it, a lot of we survey the extruders in Europe every month, so we get a sense for who was attempting to compete against China on standard profiles, who had exited that market. Our first thought is, and what we see with anti-dumping cases around the world is, the first thing you see is a change in trade flows, because it's much easier when somebody has existing capacity that they can supply into a particular market. So we will look at North Africa, we will look at Turkey as being regions which will most likely increase exports to Europe. Now Turkey is in the customs union, so slightly different. But then we would see, some of the Eastern European extruders, Southern European extruders, Greece, Spain, Italy, in a better position to compete in those standard products markets that China is exiting. What's really interesting on the extrusions case is, what we've been hearing from extruders over the years is, we're concerned about China's strength in the rail market. We're concerned about what China's doing in battery boxes with extruded products. And I think that what this does is says China's increased volumes on the high value products, that's going to end. And I think for those products, that's going to European extruders. So it's a bit different. I think for the higher end market that China was getting into, the Europeans are well positioned to capture that. The standards market, they will get some of it, but you will also see higher imports from elsewhere.
Excellent, thank you so much. We've got a few more questions, but I'll save some of those towards the end so that we can have a bit of a final discussion after we've heard from the other presenters as well. But for now, Owen, thank you very much. Really interesting presentation. I hope everybody that's online can take something away from that. So we will kind of stick with this sustainability theme to an idea, but just moving on now to our next presentation from Marius Bader, who is the Executive Director at GDA. And his presentation will look at the acceleration of change and solutions for sustainability and carbon neutrality. So this is obviously from an aluminium perspective, and I will let Marius take the floor. Thank you. Thank you so much, Marius. Apologies for the issues there, and if anybody else had any problems with seeing Marius's slides, then again, we're very sorry. We're not sure what the connectivity issue was, but we did manage to stick to your points for next slides, Maris. So hopefully a lot of people will have seen what you were talking about. I know it must have been really hard for you to be blind in what you were saying, but really fantastic presentation, and we will make sure that the presentation is available online afterwards, so you can actually download the whole presentation, but you will also be able to view a recording of this, which will have the slides on as well. So hopefully it should all make a bit more sense there. So just Maris, while we have you, and just some of the points you mentioned there, I'd just like to focus on some of those before we move on. Obviously a strong focus on the ASI, and great to see the sustainability kind of efforts that we all know come out of the ASI and how they're working to promote these and across the value chain as well. But just in your opinion, are efforts like this enough? Do we need more of a collaborative approach, or is there anything else we can be doing to kind of really shout about these kind of solutions that the ASI are offering?
There are, of course, several issues that we need to improve on. And the first, in my personal view, would be to be recognized by all other standards that are already developed or are already in action, like RBA and Drive Sustainability and all these programs. Because what we all want is to improve the CSR footprint of our material, and what we don't need is an increase of bureaucratic efforts. If we have seven to 10 different initiatives that we all need to deal with, we will need to dedicate a lot of capacities towards all these initiatives with no effect on the CSR on the ground. So one of the very important things that we do within the GDA is to discuss with, for the moment, automotive initiatives, how to recognize each other's programs. Because BMW, for example, is a strong member of Drive Sustainability, is a founding member of ASI, is also a member of COSAX, and is a member of RBA. So they need to understand that they cannot have 4, 5, 6 different standards for all their suppliers. We need mutual recognition. If we are able to do this, we will be faster. We can focus more on solving the issues than solving all kinds of audit protocols that are, the one is on green paper, the other is on yellow, but no more differences. So we need to focus on this. And this is what we do. We provide a forum to discuss with our member companies and the customers. Will we succeed? Yes, hopefully. Will it take time? Yes, it will, of course.
Certainly, yes. And it was great to hear some of the ways you mentioned that you are working with your members. And one of those especially was looking at this this idea of product design for recycling and making sure that obviously any products also have this end of life recyclability as well, and this is very important. Are you seeing a lot more members coming to you or discussing this kind of topic and putting more of an emphasis on end of life, as well as obviously the importance of where the material has come from originally?
Already confronted with demands from especially automotive customers to be transparent about the carbon footprint of a particular part that they ship towards the OEM. And of course, it's attached with demands to reduce this. But we all know that we cannot do it alone. So we need to take them into their responsibility, not just end-of-life design. This will take a few years until it's really effective, because these cars that are now end-of-life designed.
Oh, sorry, Maris. I think you've just dropped out there as we were trying to hear the last part of your answer. I'll just check if he's still there. I think the internet connectivity on that side may have just dropped off, so apologies for that. We'll move on because it looks like we have gremlins in the system and things aren't going quite to plan just at the moment. But we'll come back to Marius. We'll get Marius back on the line, and we'll have time for a Q&A again at the end of the session. So we'll move on to our final presentation of the day for now, which is Gerd Goertz, and I'm really hoping that everything will come together for Gerd here. So this final presentation will look at the Sustainable Industrial Recovery Plan for aluminium. So I'll hand over to Gerd. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, good morning, everybody, or better to say good afternoon. And thanks, Nadine, for having me here and allowing me to share the screen with Gerd, Swiss-Owen, and Marius. Unfortunately, I too have this problem to not see now the slides, while I could see the ones of Marius. I can't see mine. So I will try to give you a signal when to switch, that we can continue the morning midday show with some pictures. My first one on the case about the starting slide, and the second one is our business cards, and I want to share the business card with you because I'm very proud always to show the logos of our many members from alumina and primary production, from downstream manufacturers, from our recyclers, from our national associations. So in total we represent around about 600 plants all across Europe. And then allow me to make my first commercial break here. If you're not a member yet, now is the time to join. And you will see why, hopefully at the end also. Moving to the impact of the COVID-19, it has been very challenging for our industry. It has been said by the other speakers. There was a significant decrease in production, and we saw lower demand, government restrictions, supply chain disruptions, logistical challenges. But despite the challenges of these liquidity and solvency issues, shortage and supply of personal protective equipment, and logistic problems with all these, I think the aluminium value chain have mobilized quickly to produce also semi-fabricated products that were vital for Europe's corona response. And that helped us also to give a clear hint on what this industry is able to bring to the full economy. Think, for example, about profiles for field hospitals, oxygen tanks, and other medical equipment, as well as can sheet or foil sheet for the packaging of food, drinks, pet food, and especially pharmaceutical products. Now we too, since March, regularly checking in with our members to see their projection and then the reality. And we have just actual numbers back from our September survey. And so it remains a risk of permanent plant closures in Europe, and especially the EU, remain very high. No question about this. In semi-fabrication, extruders have been deeply affected. A decrease in production, 19% from January to August. Same period for the flat-rolled products, decreased by 15%. And there, of course, yes, transport being the most impacted, while packaging clearly remained stable. The scrap intake decreased by 16% during that period, particularly affected here the refiners. And when we see the big picture, despite all the measures that has been taken, we lost 2,500 jobs in the aluminium industry since the beginning of the crisis. This is 3% of the direct employment in Europe. We have, we hope to find these jobs back whilst we recover. But I think it's true that the full effects of the corona crisis are not yet visible. It's a time we have still to go. With restrictions now lifted across Europe, or mainly lifted across Europe, the production, as seen, is going back up. The numbers before the summer break were much higher in terms of decrease. However, this does not mean we can go back to business as usual. Now more than ever, we need to mobilize the support of the policymakers, and that brings me to the next slide, and that we have done and have given clear indication of what concrete measures are needed to help the aluminium industry to fully recover. The crisis has really shed a light on Europe's dependence on strategic raw materials from other regions. Europe must reflect now, and this is a chance within the crisis, on how to reinforce its strategic autonomy in global value chains, how to preserve existing industrial assets, and how to reshore the production in Europe instead of relying on carbon-intensive imports and being dependent on imports. Reduced European production will only increase our dependency on primary imports with a significantly higher carbon footprint as it stands today. And the aluminium value chain should not be at the forefront of strategic ecosystems, both in the recovery plan and in the transition to a climate neutral and circular economy. Industries in Europe need today more than ever an enabling framework to be more energy efficient, competitive, circular, and sustainable to deliver and invest in climate neutrality whilst operating in a free and fair trade environment. That's a lot of elements, and it is so important because we should certainly not only look at the carbon footprint, as important as it is. There are many more elements that are very important, very relevant for a flourishing aluminium industry. And the level playing field, I think, is one of the most important in a global industry anyway. The Chinese threat to the European aluminium industry remained permanent and as significant due to its massive subsidized excess production. That's why we are very happy also to see that the anti-dumping complaints we have started on extrusion have found the support of the European Union with the provisional anti-dumping duties that have been imposed on extrusions originated in China, and we hope very much that the ongoing anti-dumping investigation into certain fragile products from China will result in equally effective preliminary duties. Now, having said this, this is not a special treatment. This is about bringing fair and free trade back, because anti-dumping measures are needed when the industry gets dumped imports into their space. This is illegal, as simple as that. Now, a second commercial break with the next slide, which, of course, is always worthwhile to be highlighted. And these properties, these major properties, are also the reason why aluminium, and so we can move on to the Green Deal slide, why aluminium plays a vital role in Europe's transition into a climate neutral and circular economy and helping realizing the EU's ambitions to the Green Deal. In its use phase, it's clear we deliver energy and CO2 savings that enable the decarbonization of other sectors, and it is used to produce so many products from solar panels to lightweight vehicles, energy efficient buildings, to transmission cables, for the transfer of renewable electricity, so that we see how it is important to have a material like aluminium for this transition, for the Green Deal here in Europe. And even more important to see that we have a material sovereignty to increase primary and recycled aluminium production in Europe, rather than depending too much on imports from other regions. Diversification of supply sources is key, and a healthy European supply base is a must. Today, the EU 27 countries still import approximately 50% of the aluminium ingots they require to satisfy the domestic aluminium demand. The remaining demand is fulfilled by European primary production and recycled production, 16 and 35%. We hope to see in 2050 picture that the demand will be met by almost equal shares of primary and recycled aluminium production. The slide that follows. Our Circular Aluminium Action Plan gives here a picture showing us that we can have a full potential for a circular economy already in 10 years from now. Our action plan aims to ensure Europe to maximize our recycling rates and keeps the material in the active use. It builds on our industry's Vision 2050 program we launched more than a year ago, and also provides policy recommendations for the sector to achieve full circularity. I invite you, of course, to visit our website and have a look at both our Vision 2050 and Circular Aluminium Action Plan. And yes, in May next year, I hope to discuss this with many of you in person when meeting you in Düsseldorf. These documents provide a lot of data that you might find useful also for your business strategies. Now, moving to slide with the sustainability roadmap, it is something we are particularly proud of with the membership here, as we were able to already start in 2015 a project with our sustainability roadmap towards 2025, where we made clear what elements play a role. And that's what I meant when I say the footprint, the CO2 footprint is one thing, but there are many other elements that play a role. Aluminium should be processed and produced sustainably from bauxite extraction to smelting operation and to recycling, very clear. But in our view, these are the conditions to qualify as sustainable aluminium. It must be produced in a low carbon fashion, sourced responsibly, produced under high EHS standards, equivalent to the ones we have in Europe. Producers should also respect international social and human rights, governance, and transparency rules. A proper international definition and an industry-wide label of sustainable aluminium should take all these factors into account rather than just the carbon footprint of a primary aluminium smelting process. And yes, Marius is totally right. We need to be careful not to have an inflation of standards. It should be straight, it should be focused. But I think it is extremely important to look in a holistic way to what sustainability indeed means. The European aluminium industry anyway is committed to take this holistic approach, to run its operations in the described way, and also to embrace the US Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. So with our roadmap, we as an industry have made voluntary commitments from responsible production and sourcing to waste management, higher recycling rates, employee welfare. Progress toward the voluntary target is measured. I think that's important, and reported transparently through a comprehensive set of more than 20 sustainability development indicators. We collect them regularly. The sustainability roadmap is one element we can be proud of and feel it's very important. Moving to the innovation part is another important part of the work in that context, because to advance sustainability roadmap, the European aluminium industry is also continuously investing capital and resources into developing new manufacturing technologies, equipment, and forward-looking sustainable solutions. Also founded in 2015, this hub is a community of innovative companies from across Europe's aluminium value chain. Its goal is to trigger research projects that advance a sustainable future and tackle challenges, thereby advancing the industry's sustainability roadmap towards 2025, but also the ambitions of the EU to become a low-carbon economy. Here we see how the elements come together indeed. But the Innovation Hub would not be complete without key stakeholders from outside, policymakers, experts, and research institutes. So there's a constant exchange taking place in this platform, and the unique value of innovation for a sector becomes even more apparent in challenging times like these, where we have Chinese overcapacities, tariffs from the US, sanctions against Russia will also be a big subject just a year ago. I mean, it's a constant development in our space where the Innovation Hub takes a strong and leading role to further develop a market with a unique value proposition. Innovate again and again is the motto. The next slide shows where and how we have developed the project all along the value chain. We have from bauxite mining to the recycling. Within 5 years, we are now into 8 European innovation projects, 2 more we are very close to, and some others are already in the pipeline. It's a journey we are on here, and I think that's also my conclusion when we look at the slide. The journey towards sustainability is a journey that needs so many of these elements for us brought all together. Some smaller parts, some bigger parts, and COVID-19 has certainly given us also some very, very hard times. Very confident that our industry is strong enough to get through. When we see the development over the last months, they are the good signals. But as I said, we still have quite a way to go. So now to conclude, I think this is then the second last slide with 4 key measures we need when leading into sustainable aluminium and turn our sustainability credentials into competitive advantage in the global market. I think this is also a very strong message to be united as an industry, and so we can urge also the EU policymakers to incentivize production of sustainable aluminium in Europe and help level the global playing field. So specific measures, it's clearly boosting circularity by incentivizing circular solutions, stimulating investment in collecting and sorting, and fostering innovation. We need an ambitious EU trade policy, I mentioned this, that reinforces our defenses against unfair practices. Imports are welcome as long as they also follow the rules we all here in Europe follow as well. And to go further, of course, the predictable regulation and access to affordable green energy is a critical element as well. Predictability for our industry, absolutely necessary, especially when we see the multitudes of programs that have been put forward in the last 12 months. Last but not least, a EU competition policy with tools to prevent carbon investment leakage are critical as well. So, all in all, the recovery of EU aluminium producers will rely on also, as it was mentioned, rapid recovery of the automotive sector. It counts 40% of the European aluminium market, and we hope to see there also the measures that should include vehicle renewal programs and kickstarting also investments on recharging and refueling infrastructure, very important. Last slide finally should show some of my team members at the Aluminium 2018, and despite all these challenges ahead, I'm optimistic about seeing you all next May. I think the European producers have all the right cards in their hands. We have a reputation of quality, focus on innovation, and this long-standing commitment on sustainability. So let's hope we see each other in May and can then also reconfirm the importance of our matter in enabling the transition to a digital and green economy. And with this, Nadine, back to you. Happy to get questions and discuss with my colleagues.
So much. Thank you, and apologies again for any issues that anybody might have encountered with the slides. We have had all these slides running during Gert's presentation, but if you haven't been able to see them, then they will be available after this webinar, and we'll also make the recording available as well, so you can see all of those. Gerd, while we've still just got you, I'll just ask you just maybe a couple of questions just before we then hand over to each of the other speakers, and we can get a bit of a final roundup. But Gerd, just looking obviously at this view to the roadmap and the sustainability that we're all working so hard to try and achieve, do you think among your members, or have you heard discussions that this idea of still reaching sustainability targets and how we get to certain, or how we improve certain initiatives, is it still a clear factor in the future of our industry's plans, even though we've had this crisis? So have we kind of been set back a little bit, do you think?
No, I don't believe so. Look, we had just last week our sustainability committee meeting, which is in the September-October period, with all our committees in a meeting, and it was with so many people crowded and discussing the different elements and seeing where we are and where do we want to go. I clearly feel that the members have a good sense of it's about further developing the good things we have already done, and not to give up because of the COVID crisis. I think to the contrary, it gives us even more reason to be, as we see how important aluminium is for getting over a crisis, but also in the European context to get the Green Deal a reality, to get the circular economy a reality. You need aluminium, as simple as that. And there, the criteria for a sustainable material are clearly ideally met with our metal.
Thank you, Gerd. So we'll just what we'll do is we'll just come to each of the speakers now. I've saved up a few questions, so we can just have a final question to each, and also a bit of a roundup and any closing comments. So Owen, if you're still hopefully on the line, one question that has come through, and we kind of touched upon this shift in China towards recycling and their efforts there. A question that's come in is, what will China's shift towards recycling mean for primary scrap outflow from Europe?
Yeah, the scrap point is very interesting, because China has been changing its rules on scrap imports for a number of years, in terms of only wanting better quality scrap to come into China. And this year it had its quota system. Next year it moves away from quota system, so you can ship larger quantities to China potentially in 2021, but it's very hard to meet the particular requirements that China has on each of the grades of scrap. So I think what it means is China will be looking for higher grades of scrap to import, but the economics don't really make sense. So we wouldn't expect to see pre-consumer scrap coming from Europe. North America has been exporting pre-consumer scrap in the past couple of years, and there's probably places on the way to China that would make more sense, but sometimes on an opportunistic freight basis, you could see that material going into China. And I think that is the important point, though. China does want higher grades of scrap. It's not going to come back as a big importer of the lower grades of post-consumer scrap. So I think the most important way that this impacts trade is, over the past few years, China has been saying to its scrap importers, we don't want you to take the world's rubbish. We don't want to process it here. You can import remelt scrap ingot. So they're quite loose on that. If you ship some scrap to Malaysia, melt it into an ingot and ship it into China, irrespective of its off grade, whatnot, you can do that. So I think you will see these divergent flows happening, but the key point is you won't be able to take really low grades of scrap in Europe and ship it straight to China for it to be processed and consumed there. And there will be some buying of higher grades of scrap. China will be looking more at UBCs, taking back its class scrap. That's probably one of the places where you could see China importing pre-consumer scrap, because China is increasingly exporting can sheet, those can sheet exports are generating class scrap at the can making plants, and that's leading to a little bit of a surplus in class scrap in particular places around the world. So I think that on that particular point, you could definitely start to see some class scrap going back into China following the can sheet export trade.
Thank you. Well, like I said, I think we've had a few people really interested in obviously the facts and the figures that you have shown us today. So if you, what we'll do is we'll have obviously all of Owen's contact details available as well. So if there are any questions that you still want to put to him or to discuss, then I'm sure he'll be happy to answer anything else. But Owen, just a closing remark you'd like to leave us with?
Watch out for CRU's sustainable aluminium series. So this is more for subscribers. So you've got to jump behind the paywall to see this. But we're doing a lot of work on the European Carbon Border Adjustment Tax, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, the outlook for green premiums, mapping scrap flows around the world. What are the grades of post-consumer scrap today which are not being consumed? Where are the opportunities there? So we're all really excited as a team to be getting into this data and having great conversations with customers. So if you're interested in sustainable aluminium, you're going to be well served by CRU.
Excellent, thank you. Well, like I said, yeah, pop any links that people can then access that information through onto this chat box, and we can make anything available to participants as well afterwards. Thank you so much, Owen. So I'll just come to each of our speakers now just for a final question. So hopefully we've got Marius back, because our conversation got cut short and I would love to speak to Marius a bit more. Marius, if you are there, one question we were hoping to get to was, in your opinion, where do you see the most attention needed when it comes to building towards this carbon neutrality across the aluminium value chain?
Well, I think I tried to point out that the focus point should be in the entire value chain. It doesn't help if the aluminium industry is continuing to improve their processes and their technologies if our customers don't learn how to deal with process scrap in a proper way, because we need to have them as sorted as possible to get a closed loop recycling for high requirement applications, for example, in the automotive industry or in packaging or somewhere else. It's a common approach. It's a common effort that we can't do alone. We won't do alone. We are willing to discuss. We are willing to take our share, of course, and our responsibility, but we need to be open amongst all consumers of the material. This is, I think, the crucial point. In the past, OEMs tend to delegate responsibilities and efforts into the supply chain. It's not working in this case. But I think they are aware of this, and they already agreed on having these kind of diagnosis workshop with us, and therefore I'm pretty confident, because they know they will be the ones who have to justify their carbon footprint in front of customers and in front of policymakers. So I'm confident and looking forward to having this discussion.
That sounds good, thank you. There's one final question really that hopefully we can turn into your kind of closing comments. Just one of the questions that came in was how important trade shows and face-to-face conferences are for the GDA and its members. So I'll put that one to you as well, and hope we can turn it into a nice roundup of everything you have presented on.
Important, of course. Therefore, I'm more than happy to be a part of this one, despite all the technical challenges. We are still learning how to deal with digital platforms, but it's of very high relevance, because the entire industry with customers and suppliers comes together. The GDA, together with the Aluminium Fair, with REIT exhibitions, organizing all kinds of forums and congresses where we don't just talk about new products and new processes, but we discuss with customers, with policymakers. We have a very comprehensive program. I was only able to touch a very few points. So if you come in May, make sure you also register for the conference and make sure you learn from senior experts from the automotive, aerospace, and packaging industry, from policymakers, from NGOs. All these exchange, this physical exchange, and the personal experience is of a very high relevance for an industry like the aluminium industry. Therefore, I'm more than looking forward to see you all in May. Even if we all have to wear a mask, that doesn't really matter, as long as we can communicate and exchange ideas and learn to be better every day.
Thank you, Gerd. Yes, I completely agree. So thank you for those final comments. Now I'll just bring back Gert, hopefully, because obviously we had an introduction to the aluminium fair for next year, and there are also links within the chat box that everybody can find out more about what's coming up next year and also to register for tickets. But Gert, just a couple of questions that have come through. Obviously, people are interested to know what the kind of procedures will be when it comes to these live events and how safety precautions will be in place. Now, I appreciate everything is changing daily at the moment, and we can't really predict too far into the future, even if it is just a few months away. But what kind of changes can people expect if they attend the show next year that obviously take into consideration this hygiene and protecting visitors and exhibitors alike?
Yes, thank you, Nadine. Thank you all for participating in this day. It's been very interesting for us, for me especially. And coming back to the possibilities of running a show, it's actually quite easy. It's the same measures for all. Keep distance, avoid large gatherings of people, and until now, wear your mask. That is what it's basically all about. Looking at the number of exhibitors we're expecting, the average number of staff they are having on their stands, and going by the numbers of our visitors, we should be fine with the maximum numbers of people per day in the venue. So that is clear that we have enough space renting the halls in Düsseldorf. So it should be fine. Of course, everybody needs to pre-register. No tickets available on site, just up front, so that yes, everybody can be informed just in case something should happen. That's why that is very important to stay clear on that. But apart from that, the shows that have been on, the last one in Germany was on the boat show in Friedrichshafen, which is down on Lake Constance. It took place last week. It had overall very good results, satisfied exhibitors and satisfied visitors. Everybody played by the rules of the hygiene concept that, of course, we have too. It is online, so if you go on the aluminum website, you will be able to read it. There is nothing really scary about it. It's easy to handle, it's easy to maintain. Yes, large parties on the riverboat, as we usually have it in Düsseldorf, will not take place so far, because it's still to avoid mass gatherings. But all apart from that is possible. We go shopping, we go into restaurants, and then if you combine all that under one roof, that's exactly what a show is all about. So we see absolutely no danger. In the meantime, to get prepared or stay in contact, we have the video matchmaking, where we bring together exhibitors and visitors or interested experts amongst each other. So that can help you get over the time until May. And if you are not, due to travel restrictions, able to come, then of course we will have hybrid pods within the net that you can follow the show, that you stay in contact. And we're looking forward to hosting the show and hoping that the world has turned a little further into the better, and that we have a clearer picture on the virus and that people are able to come to Düsseldorf, or if not, then to participate over our hybrid connections. So on that, back to you, Nadine.
Thank you so much, Gert. And yeah, great to hear. And I think that will give everybody a lot of reassurance as well. So we can just hope the next few months see only positives, and we'll all get to see each other in May again, whether or not we'll be able to have, like I say, some of the larger meetings, but at least we'll all be in one place. So thank you all to everyone for joining us today, and to all of our esteemed speakers. It has been a really interesting discussion, and we're really grateful to everybody for taking part. So I hope everyone will be able to take something away from today. Like I say, the presentations will be available after this webinar. We'll let you all know. If you have pre-registered, you will get an email to find out where these can be downloaded. We will be back again at the same time tomorrow, and across this week we have a webinar a day for you. Tomorrow we'll be looking more on this idea of sustainability, but with a focus on green technologies and a look at how these are driving the sector. So we have presentations from Rio Tinto, Clavness Digital, and something that should be really interesting from NPOT, and it will be quite a controversial topic. So I hope you can all join again, and you can still register for tomorrow's session by visiting www.aluminiumtoday.com/online showcase. So thanks again to you all, and I wish you a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day.